Good evening, everyone. Welcome to HOPS virtual workshop number 4. Much anticipated subject for everybody. Thank you very much for everybody who's asked for this to come up on the subject of asset management. This is Danny here at HOPS HQ, one of the creators of HOPS. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Hello to the people who are watching. Tom Bailey, good evening. Phil McIver, hello. We'll just give everybody a second or so to join in. Do feel free to say hello in the comments, and as with all of our HOPS workshops, do feel free to ask questions in the comments as we go along. I'm pleased to say that I've got my glamorous assistant Ernie from the South Devon Railway, who's not here with me, but he's monitoring the auto queue, monitoring the comments and putting the things up on the auto queue for me to say. Hello Benfield from the Ecclesbourne Valley, and Andy Green from the Cambrian Heritage Railway. Hello to you. Thank you very much to everybody who's given us such great support on these HOPS virtual workshops. We're overwhelmed with the positivity of the feedback that we're getting, so we'll continue to do them for as long as we can. Apologies for the streaming problems that we had last week. I'm not in the same location as I was then, so hopefully this week we might have a bit more luck. Unfortunately for Friday's one, I will be there again, but we'll try our best and we'll see what happens. What you can see in front of you is a completely fake version of HOPS, which is full up with fake data that I use for delivering training and taking screenshots and things like that. We're going to be concentrating on the asset management system, which is here in the left-hand side menu, and everything to do with the asset management system is in support license HOPS. So if you haven't got a support license for HOPS, then I'm afraid you can't access this in your own version. You're more than welcome to have a trial if you want to, and if you are already an SLS customer, then it's all there for you. But hopefully this will give you a bit of a taste, and then if you're not already in the support license, say if you want to have a free trial for a couple of weeks or a few weeks, that's absolutely fine, and we can discuss that. Good evening to Gavin Compton, and good evening to Chris Taggart from the Isle of Wight Railway. Thanks for tuning in. Right, there are 5 main things that I'm going to talk about to do with the asset management system. That's fixed information to do with assets, such as where they are on a map and how tall they are and how much they weigh and how they break down into components and things like that. Defect management, including the risks arising from defects and the control measures that we put in place to mitigate them, and how we manage those and maintain that they're effective. Cyclical maintenance tasks, such as annual exams and things like that have to be done either with a certain frequency in terms of number of calendar days or number of days in use or number of miles run, all that sort of thing. The work record, which is a sort of a diary calendar of everything that's happened to a particular asset. And then finally, planned usage, for example, planning out which locos will be on which diagrams on a particular day. So fixed info, defect management, cyclical maintenance, work record, and planned usage. By far, defects are going to be the largest one of those, but I'll try my best to get through everything, and I'll see how I get on. Now, within the asset management system, there are 4 sort of levels of depth of an asset. There is what's called a asset type. So I've just gone to the asset type for signaling equipment. I know unfortunately you can't see the menus when this is broadcast, but there is a menu here. If I put it to permanent way, I'll get all my permanent way assets. Or if I put it to wagons, I might get all my wagon assets. So the first level of this hierarchical structure of assets is the asset type. The next level is the asset itself. So I've gone back to the signaling equipment asset type, and there's a list of assets that are in my signaling equipment asset type. So you can see I've got point 7, signal 3, points 1, signal 4, signal 5. There, they are the assets. That's second level, and an asset is expected to be, in terms of how I've designed HOPS, it's expected to be 1 signal, 1 set of points, 1 loco, 1 carriage, 1 fire extinguisher, 1 laptop. That's the sort of thing we're looking at for that level of the hierarchy. Now, for each of these assets, you can have 2 optional further levels, and these are called components. So in this particular asset, which is a set of points, We've broken it down into lamps and post fittings. It's not very realistic for a set of points. Sounds more like the components of a signal to me, but obviously it's all made up information. And for the fourth level, we've broken it down further still, and lamps, and we've only put one lamp in, and it's a green lamp, and we've only put one post fitting in, and it's a ladder. But you can have as many subcategories as you like for this third and fourth level of detail to do with the asset. And it's useful when it comes to defect reporting to arrange these components in terms of how the defects are going to be reported. So first of all, I said I'd look at fixed information to do with assets. So first of all, it gets a name. Some assets have a mileage, and you can set per asset type whether the asset should have a mileage or not. So because this is all signaling equipment, it all lives at a fixed point. I've set that the assets of this type can be allowed a mileage. If I go to a different type of assets, I wonder if I can guess an example. I'll have a look at my list of asset types. Oh, permanent way, of course. That's a very good example of an asset type that's going to be linear. And if I look at one of these assets, we'll see that it actually has a from mileage and a to mileage. So fixed asset information for things like signals and level crossings and lokes and anything that's fixed to 1 mileage, or things that are linear like permanent way and cabling and fencing and drainage and that sort of stuff, it can have a from mileage or a to mileage. And for things that move around and don't have a mileage at all, there's just no mileage boxes there at all. If I have a look at my wagons asset type, we'll see that there are no mileages to record at all. It's just not there. Each asset also has an in-service, out-of-service status. That's quite important as we come on to the management of defects and climbing out of a situation where an asset has been put out of use because it either has too many defects, or because the risk is too great, or because it hasn't undertaken the cyclical exams that it's supposed to. I'm going to go back to signaling equipment again because that's the one that I know I can demonstrate on. And I'll go add new this time. So I'll do one for real, because I did get feedback from some videos ago that it's very easy for me to say the system can do this and the system can do that, but it's better if you can actually see it happening in front of you. So signal number 10, I've just made up 4 miles and 5 chains. And then here is a section on the form called asset details, and it only has one field in it at the moment. But you can have as many fields as you like on a per asset type basis. So only the asset details that are applicable to the asset types that you choose will appear here, and I'll show you how to set that in a minute. And then finally, there's a map, because it recognizes that this is something that that this is something that lives in a fixed position. I can put a dot on the map as to where this particular asset is, which, although for things like signals might be very obvious where they are, there's obviously a lot of assets where it's not so obvious where they are. And if you've got to go out and inspect them, then it's quite important that you can have a map to show where they are. So I've just pressed save, and there's the summary details. There's the map that I just put the dot in, and as with everything in HOPS, lots more gets saved than what you actually write in the boxes. So when the record was created and who it was created by, and the longitude and latitude based on where you put the pin in the map, and all those sorts of things, all automatically recorded. Just to break away from this individual asset for the moment, and go back to the asset register index. Here is, where is it? Here it is, asset detail fields, where all the different fields that you can have in terms of fixed asset information are available. And where the blobs are in each asset type, there's my 6 asset types along the top. Where the blobs are is where that particular field is applicable to that particular type of asset. And you get to set that for whatever information that you feel it's appropriate to record for your particular asset types. And it'll be set here in the asset types list. So sorry, just to go back a step, I went to asset types at the top, I clicked edit, and if I edit signaling equipment, and I'll add some more fields, there's the height one, the only one that I had before. Let's imagine I'm also going to have a color field and a serial number field and what else could we have for signaling equipment? An origin field. I'll save this. I'll go back to my signaling asset that I just made a second ago. What was it? Signal number 10, I think. And suddenly all these extra fields are now available. So you get the point. You get to specify what fields are available for each asset type. So we'll say this signal came from Newbury. Its serial number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and its color is white. So you maybe not wholly appropriate fields for a signal, but you get the point if you get to pick the field types that you like. You also specify whatever components that you like. You can break it down as much as you like or not at all. It's only the first two levels, the asset type and the asset, that you have to have. The third and fourth levels are totally up to you. So just to demonstrate, we'll break this signal down into. We'll do the same as we had before. Post fittings. And in post fittings, I'll add a component of the lamp, and I'll add another component of the balance weight, and I'll add another component of the push rod. And just for completeness, I'll add another component family, and we'll call this I don't know, what should we call this? Electrical fittings. And then I'll just add one component to that, battery box. If you've got lots of assets that are very similar, if all of your signaling assets have the same family of components or very close, or all of your Mark 1 coaches have the same family of components, here's a link where you can copy from another asset and then tweak it to fit that particular asset, and it'll just copy from the other asset that you choose. So we'll go back to signal number 10. And all of this information, I keep using this word fixed information, is literally what it is. It's designed for information that almost never changes. It's not designed for real-time recording of thicknesses of brake pads or anything like that. That's a completely different part of the system. This is designed for the fixed information that we just need to record about particular assets. Obviously, only assets that have a geographical location have a mileage, will have a map. Things like rolling stock won't have a map because they don't have a fixed location. So moving on a little bit then from the fixed information, moving on to defect management, and say this is by far going to take me the longest to talk about, but I'll do my best. Each asset has a little tab here which shows outstanding defects if there are any, and gives you an add new option. There's also an add new defect option here in the side menu for quick access straight to the adding new defect page. Now, lots of assets have defect protocols. Some of them are quite rigid, particularly to do with safety critical assets like signaling and rolling stock, and some of them are a bit more laid back, like maybe IT faults or building problems or things like that. But anything that's an asset that can have a defect can be recorded in this system. It doesn't have to be limited to just railway type use, and as I said, I've certainly seen it in use for things like buildings and IT equipment and things like that. Every defect is recorded onto an asset. Every defect belongs to an asset. So because we started on the signal 10 page, it already knows we're here on signal 10. And if we know at this stage, when we're recording a defect, if we know what component family and subcomponent it is, we can put these in here now. We don't have to, it's totally optional, but if you know, you can put it in at this stage. In a little while, when we come to book this fault in order, there's going to be another opportunity to set those boxes, because of course, at the time the fault is booked in order, it might not have been what was originally thought to be the component at fault that was actually the component at fault. So there's an opportunity to correct it at the time that it's booked in order. And if it's not known, you can just leave them blank. Specify a headline for the fault. So we'll say squeaky noise. Oops. And a bit of detail. And we'll say a squeaky noise comes from the battery box and the lid is lifted. You can put as much or as little detail in as you like, whatever you're used to, whatever's appropriate for the type of asset and the circumstances that you deploy the system in. And who it was reported by, and this is just free text. There's no drop-down box or anything, because we don't do any analysis on who reports it. It's just nice to have who reported it, so that if you need to go back and ask them for more information, the person's name is there. It also may well be the case that the person who reported it isn't a user in HOPS. It might be a member of the public or a contractor or a visitor or anything like that. So it's completely free text in the reported by box. Now, if there is a defect with a piece of equipment, it has the potential to give rise to some sort of risk. So here is where we conduct a risk assessment on this particular defect. And before the whole room sort of puts its head in its hands at the prospect of having to do thousands of risk assessments, there's two things to say. One is, whether we like it or not, it is a requirement to do risk assessments. And any defect that leads to any sort of incident, the number one question that will get asked afterwards is, where was the risk assessment that was done before this particular piece of equipment was used with that defect on it? And if you can't answer that question, you're already on the back foot. And second thing to say is, a risk assessment does not have to be massively onerous. It's really, really easy, and hopefully in HOPS we've made it really, really easy here. So I can't think what a risk arising from a squeaky noise could be, so we'll have to make this up a little bit, but let's imagine fingers trapped could be the risk arising from this particular completely nonsense defect. And here is a risk assessment matrix, a 5x5 risk assessment matrix that you get to specify for your organization what the values for likelihood and severity are, and what the values for them are, the numerical values, and whether they're added or multiplied to give the score, because everybody has a different view on that, and what the boundaries of color are based on the resultant score. And the only thing that it's necessary to do to have discharged our responsibility under the Health and Safety at Work Act to conduct risk assessments is to make one click in one box to say where the risk lies. That's all it is. But suddenly we're massively, massively further forward on managing the risk arising from this defect in the eyes of any regulatory authority that might want to look into how we were managing it as time went along. Hopefully that risk assessment matrix should not be something that's difficult to think about, because it will hopefully be whatever's already in your risk management policy, and you just copy the details out of that into HOPS, whatever the color boundaries are, that if something's in the green it's okay, and if it's in the red you've got to stop immediately, and if it's in the orange you've got to put some control measures in, all that sort of thing hopefully is already in your risk management policy, and you can just put it straight into HOPS. So we've done our risk assessment there. One click, that was all it took, but we've done the risk assessment. And then finally at the bottom here, three little follow-up fields, and they'll all become much more apparent as I talk through this. First of all, there's awareness, and the two options for awareness are engineering and operations, that you can see there, and engineering only. And perhaps engineering and operations in this context would be better described, instead of operations, I could have used the department that's going to use this asset, and engineering to mean the department that's going to fix it. The awareness of this defect by default goes to both. It goes to the department that's going to use it, or the part of the organization that's going to use it, and the part of the organization that's going to fix it. But we pretty quickly realized, as HOPS organizations embraced the asset management system, that things to go into the defect system do not necessarily have to be urgent job-stopping problems. They can be just little niggles that you want somewhere to record, to remember, even if you've got no intention whatsoever of fixing it until you next have that vehicle into the workshop for its annual exam or its 10-year exam. But pretty quickly organizations settled on this rule of everything goes into HOPS. If it's a defect, everything goes into HOPS. Now this was good, because it meant they had a very, very strong hold on their defect situation. But it did mean that in some cases, the departments that were using the assets, so maybe the guards for the coaches or the drivers for the locos, were being bombarded with hundreds and hundreds of defects in lists, swamping out the ones that were actually relevant to them. And it could also lead to some overreaction. So a good example was wear on the striker plate of a Buckeye. Perfectly within tolerance, perfectly safe to carry on running, but we recorded in HOPS because when that vehicle comes in 2 years' time, we want to do something about the wear on the striker plate on the Buckeye. It goes in the system, the train goes out. 3 weeks later, a guard who is not technically competent as a carriage and wagon fitter here's a knocking noise or a squeaking noise, looks in the defect list and says, oh my God, there's wear on the striker plate on the Buckeye. We better cancel this train immediately because the Buckeye could come apart, and totally overreacts. But we'd never ever want to say to somebody, don't do something that you think is the safe thing. If you're concerned about safety, don't react. So we have to say that that would be the right thing to do. By making the defect for the awareness of engineering only, it won't appear in lists that in that case a guard might see. And there is no need for that guard to know about it. He's not technically competent to make any decisions based on it. So the best solution was to have defect awareness as engineering only, so that it maintains its position in the list of engineering defects to be resolved, but it doesn't swamp the part of the organization that uses the asset with a load of false positives. Just been asked a question on the auto queue: is there a way to backdate a defect report? For example, if paper defects on rolling stocks are submitted but take a couple of days to be uploaded into the system. I don't think there is, no, but it's probably something we could come up with. On the subject of paper defects and paper defect reporting, a lot of organizations will have a paper defect reporting system already, and I do not suggest that you throw that paper system in the bin. I suggest that you keep that paper system, and wherever those paper slips go that guards fill in, whether they go into a letterbox or whether they go to the duty manager or whether they go on somebody's desk, wherever it is that they're delivered to, it's that person's responsibility to put them in HOPS. First thing to do, put it in HOPS, because once it's in HOPS, it can't get lost. If the bit of paper falls down the back of the desk, it doesn't matter then, because the defect and the management of the defect is in HOPS. I don't recommend that you throw the bit of paper in the bin. Put the bit of paper in a box marked 2020, keep until 2025 or something like that, and hope that you never have to look at it again, but know that it's in the box just in case you need to get it back. In a lot of cases, this has enabled organizations to turn the role of accepting paper tickets and putting them into HOPS into purely a clerical role. So instead of having to send carriage and wagon slips to the carriage and wagon and loco slips to the loco and track slips into the P-way office and things like that, that all slips just go into the duty manager's office or the booking office at a particular location, or just one central point for all defects. And somebody who is a clerical person just puts it all into the system, and then it pops up for the relevant department to fix, as we will see. So engineering only and engineering or operations are the awareness of this defect, where it's going to go to in the rest of the system. Owner, I've got three options here for owner. I've got S&T manager and carriage and wagon manager, and I've also got test. You can specify whatever owners that you like for a defect. It's designed to be job roles, job titles, not individual names. And a good rule of thumb is to say that every defect must be assigned to an owner. In a minute, we'll see that that owner might say, oh, that's nothing to do with me, and push it to a different owner. But that every defect has an owner. Every defect is the responsibility of somebody somewhere. And then finally, the defect priority. And again, you can specify whatever priorities you like per asset type in your organization. So the ones I've got here is urgent, priority 1, 2 when next in the area, and 3 at next overhaul. There's always priority 0 unprioritized, and unprioritized is the highest level of priority. So it has to be explicitly prioritized down, otherwise it is the highest level of priority. So as a general rule, stuff shouldn't be submitted as unprioritized, it should be given a priority. So we'll say that this one is urgent, and we'll press save. And excuse me, we'll be shown a nice summary of what we've just entered. He says, hopefully, there it is. There's the squeaky noise. The squeaky noise came from the battery box. There's the awareness, the priority, and all that stuff. There's the risk arising, fingers trapped. And here's the risk assessment matrix. And you notice there's 2 risk assessment matrices here, even though we only did 1 risk assessment, and they're both the same. But one is designed to be the controlled risk, and one is designed to be the uncontrolled risk. Now, as we don't have any control measures on this risk at the moment, by definition, the controlled risk and the uncontrolled risk are the same thing. So that's what you get when you first save it, is they're the same thing. It's perfectly acceptable to leave it like that if the resultant risk scoring is within the bounds of acceptable risk as stated in your existing risk management policy. I've just been asked a question, is it possible to have photos uploaded? Can engineering fault logs have pictures attached? Unfortunately not at the moment, but it is definitely something that is on our radar to do, to allow you to upload photos to an asset, to allow you to upload photos to a defect and to a defect resolution and to the work record for work that's carried out, but also for things like dilapidation surveys and things like that. I've also been asked, where is the list of defect owners defined? Are these linked to users? No, they're not linked to users. It is a separate list, which I'll find here. It is, oh, sorry, it's called asset managers in the side menu. Oh, I can't do it in a new tab. And there's my list of asset managers in the system. And who has the ability to assign a defect to an owner is determined by permissions. So there's 6 asset managers there, but when I submitted that defect a second ago, I only had 3 options. That's because I've only got permission to assign it to those 3 people. And so again, it's totally controlled by you, as you'd expect, in permissions for who has the ability to assign ownership of a defect to a different person. Now, in many cases, that will be it. That will be the end of the defect recording process. As I say, I don't recommend that you throw the piece of paper in the bin, but now that it's in HOPS, it doesn't matter if that piece of paper does get lost because the data is here in the system. So let's look at where it appears. I'll go back to the asset register, and here is my asset register of signalling equipment. So the first place it appears is on this summary sheet. Here's the little defects columns, outstanding defects, and I can see there's 1 there. And if I click on it, it'll take me to what that 1 defect is. If I go back a step, I can also click on signal 10, click on the defects tab, and I can see there's 1 outstanding defect, no closed defects, and an extra tab here for outstanding defects that were reported in the last 7 days. Because I do recognize that in a lot of organizations that are likely to be using HOPS, there are gangs that come in on particular days, the Tuesday gang, the Friday gang, all that sort of stuff. So having a what's happened since we were last here option pretty quickly became useful. I can also go and look at the signal and equipment list, and instead of clicking on signal 10 in particular, I can see all the defects on all the signal and equipment assets. So there's the one I just recorded, 3164, all that information. And then underneath there's one from a previous demo, 1066 on signal number 5. Tells me how many days it's been outstanding for, what the priority is in blue, who the owner is in yellow. I can also, if I was more concerned with being the manager of the S&T, for example, than looking in a computer system, if I go back to the Asset Managers menu that I showed you a second ago, and again, I'd only have permission to see the ones that actually related to me, so I'd imagine I'm the S&T manager, and there's Outstanding Defects 1 again. So it doesn't matter which part of the organization the defect has come from. It might not even be a signaling asset, but somebody somewhere has decided that it's my responsibility to sort it out. So as an asset manager, I may only ever need to look at this part of the system to see the defects that only relate to me, because I'm not really concerned with anything else. I can filter this if I want to different priority levels, assets, and what order I want it sorted in. Obviously, there is only one thing on the screen there, so it's not going to change the sort order, but you can sort it so that all the highest priority ones are at the top of the list, for example. And if I press this button here, job sheet, it'll convert it into a printable job sheet for me, or a printable job sheet for me to give to somebody in my team. I don't know whether you can see on the screen, unfortunately, the print dialog box that's just come up, because this page is designed to be printed. That gives detail of the defect, big space to write in ink for the person to write in what rectification they've done, whether it's in order or not, and for them to sign it. Hopefully that then comes back into the office and we close the defect off in HOPS. You don't, of course, you don't have to use the printable printable job sheet. It's just there if you want it. If your technical staff are happy enough to be putting their fault information directly into HOPS, then that's a slicker way to go about it. So I'll click on this defect again, 3164. Up the top here, there's a close link. I'll click on this. Again, different permissions for closing than reporting a fault. Here are those component family boxes again, so that if the component that it was originally reported to be turns out that it wasn't that at all, I can correct it at this stage to say what it actually was. And then I get to record some detail about the closure of the defect. So I'll put lid replaced with new lid, works much better now, or whatever level of comprehensiveness you determine is appropriate for your staff to record in the detail box when they close a defect. Who it was closed by. Now, of course, whatever I write in this box, HOPS is going to record the user that was logged in that actually did it. So there's no getting round putting other people's name in the box. But just like the recording of competence and the logging of a defect in the first place and all those things, I do understand that it's not always the person who's very good at closing the defect that is the same person who's very good at putting things in HOPS. So that was one of the reasons why we invented that job sheet, so that the person who was actually good at fixing things could sign, and then somebody who's just a clerical person with no technical competence can come to HOPS and transcribe the information in. So we'll say it was closed by A. Smith. And the date that it was closed. So on this one, going back to a question that was asked earlier, you can change the date, but not when it's logged. We'll have to see if we can do something about that. And then I'll close it. And you can see that the outline of the table has gone green, just to visually draw my attention to the fact that, that this defect is closed and is obviously no longer going to count in the open defect statistics. So if I go back to signal number 10 again, this page, no longer in outstanding now, but it will now, fingers crossed, there we go, appearing closed, again with a green outline, just to visually draw my attention to the fact this is a closed one. And there's the details of how I recorded that it was closed. It doesn't get deleted out of HOPS, it stays in HOPS forever, for historical recording. I'm just going to ask the question, in defect awareness, is engineering a fixed term? If, for example, if it was a signal, then S&T would need to be informed. Yes, as I said, engineering in this context means the department that's going to fix it. So don't read too much into the word engineering, and I suspect we can probably come up with some better words than engineering and operations, user and maintainer, or whatever it is. It doesn't mean engineering in terms of locomotive engineering, and operations doesn't mean signaling and driving and guarding and things like that. It just means the user and the maintainer. Now, we made a few changes to this defect as we went along, and I can change it at any time. Incidentally, if I go edit this defect, I can get back to the same page. If I make a spelling mistake or something like that, I want to add some new text, it's no problem. I can go back and edit it at any time. But just to make sure no funny business happens with regards to editing it, there's an updates tab here, and every change that we make to the defect is recorded here. So we closed it only a couple of minutes ago, and then I made a change, and there was what the old detail was and what it used to say, and there's the new detail and what I changed it to. So nobody can sort of frig the system by going and changing a defect record after an incident has taken place. If I adjust the risk assessment, for example, and then I look at the updates, there's the old severity and there's the new severity that I changed it to. So absolutely everything is recorded in here. You can also record in here your own updates. So I'll go add new, and I'll go box lid ordered. I know it's going to appear out of order, but there's me recording that I've ordered the new lid for the box. Now, one of my favorite sayings is, there's no rule or law that says you can never ever have any risk. The rules and laws only say you must identify what the risk is and then do everything reasonably practicable to make sure that nobody comes to harm. So it's not a requirement of any railway to instantly, immediately fix every single fault. You've got to identify the risk and then fix it within an appropriate amount of time dependent on the risk. But that doesn't mean that nobody's ever going to get caught out. So, for example, in this lid box scenario, let's imagine the fault had been lid was stiff rather than lid was squeaky. That would have been a better fault. So lid was stiff. Risk is somebody's going to get their fingers trapped as they try and open and close it and it suddenly moves. I could record the defect, or I will record the defect here in HOPS. And let's imagine it happened on a Monday. On Tuesday, I ordered the new box lid. So I record it in HOPS. On Wednesday, the new box lid arrives and it's the wrong type. So I record in HOPS that I've sent it back. The new lid is going to arrive on Friday, but on Thursday, somebody traps their fingers in the box. I can now show, based on this updates to the fault record, that we were aware of the fault, that we risk assessed it, that we determined it was appropriate to wait a couple of days or to keep it in service for a couple of days while we waited for the new lid to arrive based on the balance of risk, and that we were just unlucky that somebody managed to trap their fingers in it before the new lid that would actually fit had arrived. And we're in a much stronger position to defend that than if we had no record of the risk, or no record of the defect, or no record of the risk assessment, or no record of the fact that we were doing everything reasonably practicable to get this new lid fitted, and it was just bad luck that somebody managed to get injured before the new lid had been fitted. Now, in some cases, when I've explained this before, there's a sort of a look of horror to go, well, we haven't got time to be recording all that stuff. You know, we're always short of volunteers. We've always got more work than there is hands to do. We're never going to have time to record this. And I say, well, I've just looked on Facebook, and you have volunteers that write reams and reams of really good, engaging stories and information about the work that's going on in mainly railways. Just copy and paste that and put it in here. It doesn't have to read like a perfect story. It just has to be a record with a timestamp on it like this that you can't alter. That is a pretty good defense that you did that work on that day. And if it ever comes to be tested, I'll stand up in court next to you and say that I haven't changed this date, or you haven't asked me to change it. So the work record is really, really useful. I'll go back to the defect now, and I'm going to reopen it because the squeaky noise in this case, or the stiff lid, has reoccurred. I could just start it off as a new defect. It's up to you what your policy is on that. But I'm going to reopen this one just to show that it can be reopened. So I'm here on a page that looks very similar to when I closed it, but this time it says please enter details to enable the defect to be reopened. Fault has reoccurred. Reopen. And now it's open again. And hopefully in the updates, it'll tell me the date that it was reopened and the reason why. So you can start to see that very easily this list of updates builds up into a pretty comprehensive picture of what we've done and how we've behaved. Now, just to think about this risk again, some risks that arise from defects require control measures in order to keep the level of risk down to an acceptable level. And we might not think of it like that, but it is what we're doing in terms of the management of risk. Dodgy door handle on a passenger train, we quite often lock the door out of use. That is a control measure mitigating the risk of that door lock not working properly. There are loads of things that we do without even thinking about it that are us subconsciously identifying what that risk is and putting a control measure in place. But we do fall down a little bit sometimes when we have very good ideas about what control measures should be and putting them in, and then not really monitoring them to make sure that they remain effective. And I'm not saying that everything has to be monitored every second of the day, but I am saying that some things require monitoring at some level of frequency. Well, HOPS can help you there. Because let's go down to the bottom here, to this section we haven't looked at yet underneath the risk assessment called control measures. And we'll imagine that the risk posed by this box lid is so dangerous that we're just going to say no one's allowed to open that box until it's been repaired. Okay, put a new control measure in, add new. Control headline, box not to be used. And the detail, sign fitted to box to say that the lid may not be opened, lid is repaired. Again, I'm being a little bit silly, but you can specify whatever control measures that you like and whatever the detail or the benchmark is that you expect that control measure to maintain. And by far, the most popular control measures that I see in here are things like compartment locked out of use, door locked out of use, things like that. And I would say probably about 1 in 20 defects in HOPS has a control measure on it. So it's not something that I'd necessarily expect to see applied to absolutely every defect. Every control measure also has an expiry date. Here's the expiry date. Because if we're prepared to live with a defect, if we're prepared to live with a risk mitigated by the control measure, there's probably a length of time that we're prepared to accept that risk for. We're probably not prepared to live with it forever. Another example is if the springs in a seat are starting to get a bit worn and there's a risk that a spring could pop out. We might say, well, it's perfectly fine to keep that coach in service until the end of the day, or for 2 days until Fred comes in on Thursday and then he'll have a look at it. We don't go mad and say take it out of use immediately, but similarly we don't want that vehicle to remain in use for the next 20 years because eventually then somebody will spike themselves on the spring. So every control measure can have an expiry date, and here's where it's set. So we'll say this one is okay for 4 days until the 28th of the 5th. And I've used the words operations and engineering again, which again I really mean the department that's going to maintain it and the department that's going to use it, to say whose responsibility the maintenance of this control measure is. And I'll press save. At the moment I press save, I'm presented with the risk assessment matrix again, but this time I'm assessing the controlled risk, and I've decided that the controlled risk brings this right down to a 14, well into the green. There's a reminder of the control measures on the risk on the defect, so that I don't forget what they are when I'm risk assessing it, and I'll press save. So now my uncontrolled risk was 18 and my controlled risk was 14. There's my control measures down the bottom there and how many days remain on it. And again, I know that risk assessment isn't a glamorous subject, but it only took us 1 second there to click a box to say what's the new risk, but it has made such a difference to our management of safety in the organization as a result of having conducted that risk assessment. If I go back to some of the other defect lists that I looked at, you can see on everywhere where the risk occurs, there's the same colourful columns on the right-hand side with the uncontrolled and controlled risk, just to make sure that nobody ever loses sight of a red or an orange or whatever it is risk in a swamp of what would otherwise be green ones. Now, the next problem is then, we've decided that that control measure is necessary. Now we need to make sure we actually maintain it, because we'd be in a very sticky situation if we said we were going to do this control measure and then we didn't do it. So I'm going to introduce this this concept called the checklist, which is here on the menu on the left-hand side. And a checklist won't be appropriate for all asset types. It will be appropriate for things like rolling stock and for things like locomotives. And I'm sure at the moment in most organizations, before the guard takes the train out for the day, he's probably got an A4 checklist on an A4 sheet of paper where he ticks that he's unlocked all the doors and he's done the brake test and all those things, and it's swept through, and then he signs it to say, yes, I've done all those things. And I'm sure loco staff have a morning checklist that they must go through before they take the loco off shed. Those sorts of things are likely to happen every single day. Maybe for other types of asset like signalling equipment, it might be once a month, and for buildings, it might be once a year, or whatever it is. But in addition to that checklist, you'll now have a much more comprehensive checklist to come out of HOPS. So I will go to your checklist. I've picked signalling equipment just because that's the one I was working on. I'll pick which assets I want to be included in this checklist. So if this was a checklist for a guard, you'd pick the coaches the guard was taking, or if it was the checklist for a driver for a loco, you'd pick the loco that he's taking. I'm going to walk around and do my inspection of all this signalling equipment now. So I've ticked everything, and I'll press create checklist. Now this is again designed to be printed, so it doesn't look fantastic on the page, but it's designed to be printed, and here's what it shows. First of all the assets in the selection, so you know the assets that you're looking at are actually in this list. Second of all, defects with control measures. So there's the one on signal number 10, battery box, squeaky noise. There's the control measure, and there's a box for me to tick or initial as part of my inspection, however frequently that inspection is, to say I have looked at this control measure and it remains effective. The two above it have already expired, whatever their expiry date was, and it's not telling me what that is because it was one that was applicable only to engineering, so I sort of don't need to know, is already expired. So it's put fail in the box. I can't check it because I don't know what it is, and whatever it is, it's expired. Now, I'm not saying that if a control measure expires, that means you must cancel all services for the whole day. But what I am saying is the person who is doing this inspection, whether it's a guard or a loco crew or whatever it is, now needs to escalate this problem. They need to go back to the duty manager or to the running shed foreman or whoever it is that's in charge and say, the defect system has got a defect in it and the control measure is expired. So that means whenever this defect was reported, somebody decided it was okay until a certain date, and we're now beyond that date. And that person with management responsibility should then look at the list and look at the defect and either say, oh yes, you're right, the system has saved us there because it isn't safe for that to be going out, and then not use that asset. Or to say, yes, the system has prompted us to look, but actually, having looked at the physical asset itself, the defect hasn't deteriorated, and we're quite happy for it to go out for another 3 days because we know what the maximum rate of deterioration is of that particular component, or we're prepared to accept that risk, or whatever it is. And in that case, the person comes back to HOPS, edits the expiry date, it's recorded in the updates list on that defect, and either prints a new one of these lists, or in many cases the duty manager just signs the list next to where it says fail as a sort of a double check to the person that it's okay to take the train, even though the list says that the expiry date has passed. And again, there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's not fiddling the system. That is using the system to prompt you to have a look, deciding what the appropriate course of action is, updating it in the system so that it's recorded and everybody's happy. And I quite frequently see a control measure that's got 7 days on it, and 7 days later it's extended for another 7 days, and 7 days later it's extended for another 7 days, and 7 days later it's extended for another 7 days. And that's good. That's a good sign that that was being looked at every 7 days, and somebody deciding, actually, yes, it's still fine, we'll go for another 7 days. That's not a bad thing at all. Further down is a list of all the defects on all the assets, which has a page break in it in the printed version, just so that the person with the list can see what all the defects are. This helps create confidence in the system that defects that they can see they've reported in the past have actually made it into the system. They haven't just got forgotten about. And also stops a bit of double reporting, that if something happens, and they notice that the lid of a box is squeaky, they can look in the defect list and go, oh, I don't need to report that again. I don't need to waste mine and everybody else's time because I can see it's already in the system. So in the organizations that use these defect checklists, and it is mainly for locos and rolling stock type scenarios that it gets used, generally the duty manager the day before prints the list last thing in the afternoon, prints the list for tomorrow, leaves it on a clipboard on the desk. Whatever the arrangement is that you want to have is absolutely fine. But once a day, or once whatever frequency is appropriate, the list gets printed. Somebody initials the box to say the control measure remains effective in the same way that they sign their current checklist. And then it goes into that box marked 2020, keep until 2025, that you hope you'll never have to look at again. But if you are ever called on to demonstrate that you are monitoring that control measure, that you are managing that risk on that defect, you can go to the box and get the bit of paper out and show, look, here it is, day by day by day, that every single day that was being examined. I'm being asked, is there a way of creating a checklist for a line walk inspection, including P-way and signalling, including remote automatic signals? There's no way of creating a checklist for that sort of thing in HOPS, because I don't imagine that that varies from week to week. I imagine that when you go out and do a line walk inspection, you've got the same bit of paper in front of you that you have every single week. But I'm imagining that in addition to those existing pieces of paper, that you take the HOPS list sort of stapled to it of the particular defects that are outstanding at that moment, and the particular things that or the particular control measures that you're supposed to be looking for. So in the case of P-way, it could be clamps on rails or things like that. I haven't gone as far as to make a checklist system in HOPS that you sort of walk down the track or round the loco with, ticking boxes on the page to say, yes, I've oiled it, and yes, it's still in, because I just think that would be too much. And I think having heritage people walking around with iPads and things like that is a bit of a bridge too far, for the moment anyway. So the checklist is what's used to monitor those control measures that you're committing to by putting them into the system. It gives you a tool with which to demonstrate that you're managing that risk arising from that defect. So you have to think carefully about what your control measures are going to be, because whatever you put in, you're committing to servicing them. And as I said, I think about 1 in 20 defects in HOPS has got a control measure on it. So it's not something that every single defect probably needs. You also have to be smart about when you pick your control measure expiry dates. There's no point in picking a control measure expiry date in 2 days' time for something that's not going to be inspected for a month. Locos and rolling stock that are probably inspected every day, you could put any day you like. But if it was a building fault and you know no one's going to walk around the building to check the control measures are still in place 6 months until 6 months' time, your control measure minimum is going to have to be 6 months. Now, there's one more thing about defects that I'm going to talk about before I move on, and I'm almost certainly not going to finish by 8 o'clock, but I'll just plow on regardless. And that's called triaging. Let me go back to my asset managers list, and I'm going to imagine that I'm the carriage and wagon manager. I'm just going to have to book a defect on a carriage and wagon asset. Sorry. Passenger coaches, here we are. Let's see me do it again. Defects. Where's that new? Oh, don't let me down now. Right, sorry, I know what's going on here. Not all asset types except defects. You can set whether or not an asset type is allowed to accept defects and who has permission to record them. So there's a combination of permissions and configuration settings tripping me up here, but don't worry, I'll struggle on. So I'll go back to asset managers. I think it'll work similarly. I know if I'm the S&T manager, let's say I've got one S&T defect outstanding, but this time I'm going to click on the triage list. And the triage list will list all of my defects, but this is where it will allow me to push defects on to another manager. And although I'm not suggesting that the PWA manager sits and gives all his defects to the S&T manager and the S&T manager gives them to the cafe manager or anything like that, I am suggesting that the chances are there might be more than one group or more than one sub-manager or team leader that might repair a technical defect. You might have a running shed foreman that gets all the loco defects, but he has a gang that comes in on a Tuesday that works on diesel engines and a gang that comes in on Wednesday that works on steam engines. And of that gang that comes in on steam engines, there are probably some people that specialize in braking systems and some people that specialize in paintwork and some people that specialize in boilers and all these different things. And it'd be quite nice if the system could cope with delivering this defect to the appropriate person. So of all my defects here, I can change the owner and priority here in this right-hand menu. And again, it's determined by permissions who I can push it to. So this time, I know the permissions are not realistic here, but this time, as well as having the carriage and wagon manager, the carriage and wagon manager might choose to push it to his Tuesday group or his Wednesday group, based on what the nature of the defect is. And you can build up as complicated a triaging system as you like by judicious use of permissions as who can give defects to who, hopefully so that it trickles down in a nice tree so that the people actually who are going to fix the defects have it in the system for them. In small organizations, I don't suspect there'll be any triaging at all. In the biggest of HOPS using organizations, I suspect there'll be a fairly significant degree of triaging. So I've just given that to the carriage and wagon manager Wednesday group, and at this stage I can also reprioritize it. So if I disagree with my technical skills with what the person who reported it initially thought was the priority, I can change it here. And I'll press update. And that defect has now been updated to apply to that new manager, not to me, and therefore it's disappeared out of my list. So this is triaging. And in the organizations that have really embraced HOPS, the first thing they do when they come in the morning is they triage all the defects. And that's probably no different to what would happen in a paper system. It's just now that it happens on a computer instead, and is all nicely recorded. That's as far as I'm going to go on defects. There is loads and loads of little Easter eggs and different things and bits and bobs to do with defects that I can't sort of get in all one phone conference, but I've given you the bones of it there. On the asset register index page, here is where you set what the defect priorities are for each asset type, and here is where you set the risk assessment matrix details. And here's where you set what the asset types are, and here's the whether or not they can be recorded as or have defects recorded on them, and who the default owner is. Only the default, so you can change it, but the default when a defect is presented for that asset type. Right, do feel free to ask any questions in the comments as we go along, as you have been doing, and I'll do my best to answer them as we go along. Right, moving on then. So we talked about fixed info. We've just talked at great length about defects, which I knew would take up most of the hour. I'm now going to talk about cyclical maintenance. So I'll go back to my asset register index, and I'll have a look at signaling equipment. So cyclical maintenance. Here's the cyclical maintenance columns over on the right-hand side here. You can have as many cyclical maintenance tasks as you like. In fact, let me go back to Asset Register Index. Here's the list of maintenance tasks. Not specific to an asset type, just every task that you could possibly imagine put in this list. All the ones related to rolling stock, all the ones related to PAT testing, all the ones related to fire extinguishers and track walks and everything. Anything that's an exam that has to be done or an assessment or anything like that on a piece of equipment, on an asset, put it in this list. And for each type of exam, you can record the frequency with which it's required in one or more of these three ways: a calendar time in days, months, and years, a days in use time, and a miles in use length of time. So you could have something that's required every 90 calendar days, come what may. You could say it's required every 7 days of use, doesn't matter how far apart they are, or every 20,000 miles for assets that accumulate mileage. And lastly, you specify what the declaration is that you're making when you successfully complete this task. So in the case of a 7-day exam, we've said the declaration is fit to run. And this is quite a good example, actually, this 7-day exam. It's 7 days of use, not 7 calendar days. But there is a limit on that to make sure that this vehicle doesn't do 6 days this year and then sit in a siding for 3 years. And then when we want to get it out again, go, oh, great, it's still got 1 day left on it. Obviously, that wouldn't be right because it's been sitting there for 3 years. So in addition to being required once every 7 days in use, there's a maximum 90 calendar days as well. So that's quite a sensible thing for a 7-day exam. So we list out here all the different types of exam that there are to do. Then we attribute to each of our assets which exams they require. So here's my signal number 10 that I created earlier. There's the maintenance tasks. At the moment, it requires 0 maintenance tasks. So we'll soon sort that out. We'll go add new. And we'll say this signal number 10 requires an annual exam. And we'll also say that it requires a, what else have we got here? No, nothing really appropriate. I say it requires a PAP test. I know that's not appropriate, but just so that I can show you that you can have as many of those maintenance tasks applicable to as many assets as you like. And if I go back to the list of signaling equipment now, you'll see it now says 2 tasks. And here is in these 3 columns where it lists when they're next required. So a due date, which is the earliest of the calendar-based date exams. Days, which is the number of days in use that it has left before it requires an exam for the earliest of its exams, and miles, the number of miles that it has left until the next of its exams. And you can see that this one says before now, because these 2 have never ever been recorded. So it just says now. It needs to be done now because it's never been done. I've just been asked about if we have hours run. There's no hours run option in here at the moment, but again, I'm sure it's something that we could add if we needed to, although in a minute I'm going to show you how easy it is to record mileage without even doing anything. I'm not quite sure how we'd go about recording hours run. Maybe somebody would have to put it in every day, how many hours it had run, but it's definitely something we can think about. So I'll go to these 2 tasks that signal number 10 requires, and I'm going to say I've just done its annual exam. The date is today. You can change it if you want to. You have to specify whether it was conducted before or after the day's usage so that we know whether to count today as a day of use in the next exam period if it's based on days in use, and whether or not it succeeded, if it was fit to use or whether it was not fit to use. And if you select no, the asset will be put out of use in HOPS. If you select yes, then it won't. So I'll press save. And here's the list of maintenance tasks that have ever been completed on this asset. Maintenance tasks done, 1. And there it is, the annual exam. It was fit to use and it was logged by me at this particular time. If I go back to the maintenance tasks required list, there's still only 2 in here, the 2 that it requires, but it now shows when it was last conducted and therefore when it was next due. But because it still hasn't had a PAT test, if I go back to the list of signaling equipment, it still says before now. It's still in red saying this asset is not a good one to use because there is some sort of maintenance outstanding on it. So I'll go and record that I've done a PAT test now. I'll say I did it back in January. Whoops. And it passed its PAT test, save. So there we go, in this little list of all the exams that have ever been conducted on this asset. And if I go to maintenance tasks required, both of them now have at least 1 entry. Again, I can log it as many times as I like because obviously I'll do these maintenance tasks, hopefully more than once. But now if I go to the list of signaling equipment, it gives me the earliest date that the earliest maintenance task is required. So because I did the PAT test in January, that's the thing that runs out first. It runs out on the 25th of January 2021. So that's when I need to have paid attention to this asset again to stop it going red. And the name of the game is to keep as much red off this page as we possibly can, and to ideally not use the stuff that is red unless, of course, some sort of recorded risk mitigation measures are in place to say why we're using an asset that hasn't been maintained in accordance with whatever our asset maintenance policy is. Whoops. Now, whoops, sorry, let me go back. As well as being able to see the maintenance tasks required for that individual asset, just like with everything else, just like with defects, I can also look at all the maintenance tasks for all of the assets in this asset type. So instead of just looking at signal 10, I can look at all my signaling equipment, and I can see that points number 7, there's no record of the annual exam having been conducted. Signal number 5 is due a PAT test because it was last conducted on the 26th of March 2019, and it should have been done by the 26th of March 2020. But there's my 2 for signal 10, and they're both black, so they're both fine. And almost everything in the asset management system, you can see it for an asset, and you can see it for an asset type as well. I've just been asked, can you upload a scan of a maintenance checklist against a maintenance task? Nope, you can't upload any images or files or anything like that to the asset management system at the moment. Like everything in HOPS, it develops sort of quite slowly, but it develops in light of its usage, and it's definitely something that we intend to do in the future, to allow you to upload a scan of that checklist with the oily thumbprint on it to say that the annual exam is done, and the actual signature, to load it up into HOPS. Again, I wouldn't suggest you throw that bit of paper away, put it in that box that you'll keep for however many years that it is, and hope you never have to look at it again. But just like the scanning and uploading of competence evidence, having that in HOPS will provide that additional level of security, that scan of that piece of paper is available and accessible and backed up and can be viewed by senior managers to see whether it actually exists or not. If you only need to record hours and have no requirement for mileage recording, could you use miles as hours? You could, but I never recommend using a system not in the way that it's designed. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any way that would necessarily go wrong. I would like to include some financial information for some major assets. These need to include the value when acquired, current value, and insured value. Is this possible? Yes. So we may have fields for it already, or we may not, but if we go to the asset detail fields, do we have those fields? Let's have a look. There's acquisition cost and replacement value, certainly. But whenever you come up with anything that's a field that you want that isn't already in the system, you just let me know, and if I decide it's appropriate, I'll add it in, and then it makes it available to everybody as well. Andrew Walker there, who asked that question, if there's things in there that aren't in there, just let me know and I'll add them in. Would it be possible to set a maintenance task to be due on a future date rather than the day it was assigned? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but the maintenance task is always due by the period after it was last done that is set for that maintenance task. So every maintenance task has a period with frequency with which it must be completed. And so the due date is due that amount of time or miles or days in use after it was last done. If I've misinterpreted that, please feel free to elaborate in the comments, and it'll pop up for me to answer. Right, I said I was going to show you a way to easily record mileage accumulation without doing anything particularly onerous. Remember this checklist that we had? Where's it gone? Asset management checklist. If I pick an asset type that is allowed to accumulate mileage by virtue of the settings of the asset type, then as well as being able to select which assets are going out on this particular train, I can also select a diagram from the list, and you get to specify what the diagrams are, 3 round trips, fish and chip train, whatever it is that you normally have, and what date it's going to do that diagram on. And just by clicking create checklist, that mileage has now been recorded. So it's not as if I have to go into a separate mileage system every time I want to add mileage. If I fill out that little drop down box on the checklist, it'll automatically record the mileage for me. If I go to that wagon now, I forget which ones I included, but I think 1, 2, 3, and look at the usage tab. Is that it? Yep. Tomorrow, Tuesday, the 26th of May, a red timetable. It's been given 5 miles with a description of test 5. And so far, it's accumulated 3 records of 3 days in use, totaling 14.05 miles. Broken down by year or a total. So this asset has accumulated 164 miles. And just like everything else, as well as being able to see it for wagon 1, 2, 3, I can see it for usage record. I can see it for the whole asset type. So this table doesn't look particularly full because there's not much data in, but all the assets in this asset type are down the side. All the calendar days are along the top, coloured in by the timetable. As everything in HOPS, it all links together. And then totals in both directions in terms of the number of miles and the number of days that it's done. And this is broken down by year and month, and of course a total for every asset in the type in terms of usage and days. Now I'm just going to go back a step. I put that asset did 5 miles, I think, on that day. Yep, 5 miles. But actually, it got taken out the train halfway through the day, and it only did 2 miles. Well, that's fine. I'll just go back and I'll change it to a 2. I can still tweak this. It's no problem at all. And actually, on the 8th of March, it didn't do 5.5 miles. It went out for an extra trip in the evening. It actually did 7.5 miles. So I'll save it. You can manually add a usage record as well if you really want to, but I suspect that most things that accumulate mileage are likely to have checklists created for them if you fully embrace the asset management system. 100 miles, fish and chip tray. So I would only really be tempted to use the manual add mileage usage record for exceptional circumstances. Otherwise, you're just making a big rod for your own back. So again, to quote from experience of organizations that use the asset management system and use it for the recording of mileage, just that little extra job of choosing a diagram off of the checklist creation automatically logs all these mileages, and they don't have to think about Excel spreadsheets or anything like that and remembering to fill them in because it all just happens nicely. In the same vein as it's part of the duty manager's job description to print off the checklists for the following day, it's also part of the duty manager's job description to make any amendments to the mileages if the service that you were planning to run that day didn't actually run. Can you preset local exams due by miles? Example, exam due every 100 or 200? Yes, absolutely. If we go back again to the asset register index and go maintenance tasks, let's imagine that I don't know, we'll call it a B exam. I never know what they're all called, and we'll say it once every 100 miles. And the declaration will be fit to run, or fit to run. So where's it gone? Here it is, B exam every 100 miles. And I'll go to my wagons and I will say they've both done more than 100 miles already. Let me go back a step and I'll change my mind and I'll say that B exam is actually required once every 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles. I'll go to my signalling equipment. Where's it gone? There it is. Oh, not signalling equipment, sorry. Go to my wagons. And I'll say that wagon 456 requires that maintenance task, the exam. And I'm incidentally here, I'm not saying it requires it once, I'm saying it requires it ongoing from now on. And if I now go back to the list of wagons, it's, oh, of course, it's required now because it's never ever been done. Oh dear, sorry, log task. And I'll say it was done 3 years ago to hopefully catch some mileage that's happened since, just so that you can see that it does calculate it. So look at my list of wagons. Okay, I'm still not quite right. I've still got it. It was due 13.2 miles ago because it's done 1,014.99 miles. But anyway, you can see that that mileage thing will count down a number of miles that it has left before it turns red and starts going negative to say that's how many miles that particular asset has got left. And similarly, we haven't seen before, but here it is. That's 5D, 5 days. This asset has 5 days of use left before it's going to require one of its maintenance tasks. So this has got all three on it. It's got a maintenance task that has to be done by calendar days, a maintenance task that has to be done by days of use, and a maintenance task that has to be done by miles of use. And again, the name of the game is to try and stop this page going red. And in some cases that's easy, and in some cases it isn't, but far better to know that you're not succeeding in it if you aren't than to think that you are when you're not, and then maybe write some alternative process or some risk mitigation measures for how you're going to cope with the fact that some of these assets have gone red and maybe you can't keep up with them. Right, the last thing, the very last thing, and it is a reasonably quick thing, is each asset has a work record. This last tab that we haven't looked at yet, this work record. And the work record lists everything that's happened to this asset from all the different parts of the system. So it looks like it's in reverse date order. So we can see the earliest thing that happened was the defect report 2824. If I click on it, it'll take me there so I can see what it was. Then the defect was updated, the same defect, then it was updated again, then it was closed, then it had a maintenance task done, and then there was a manual record added. I can add a manual record to say this wagon visited the something, I won't name names, railway for their gala, or whatever information that you want to record, just to add to the little calendar of work record that's happened about this loco or wagon or coach or building or whatever it is. Easy way to record it, and it's there and it's dated and it's timed, and no one can argue with the fact that you recorded it then. Makes it a lot easier for you to defend what happens to it in the future. Again, updates and things that people post on Facebook, brilliant. Just copy and paste it, put it in there, because it's all work record. It's all useful stuff. Last but not least, and I don't know how successful I'm going to be in this, but we'll have a go. Last thing is planned usage. Planned usage. And for planned usage, I'm going to very quickly create a new asset type, and I'm going to call it logos. And I'm going to, that's all I need to save. I'm going to quickly put an asset in it, locos. So new first asset name, whoops, Thomas. I'm going to add another asset, and I'm going to call it Henry. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the planned asset usage tab, planned usage. And the planned usage, it's designed for locos, but you can use it for anything, is planning out in advance when locos are going to be used, or when assets are going to be used. So again, broken down by year and month, calendar colors copied from the calendar. There's May with no locos on it at all at the moment. First of all, I'll go edit requirements, and I'll add the sort of blank slots for a that a loco which required it. And so many railways particularly call their steam diagram steam 1 and steam 2. So we'll do the same, create new steam 2. And you can see there that I've now created unallocated spaces called steam 1 and steam 2. And if I now go edit allocations, I can allocate locos, in this case, to them. There's my list of assets, so I'll allocate those to Thomas. And I'll allocate these to Henry. It's not doing anything particularly groundbreaking in terms of processing, but it is giving you, the same as everything else in HOPS, gives you a one single source of official truth about what's planned and how things are going to run. At this stage, this does not contribute to its mileage, because it doesn't know what mileage Steam 1 and Steam 2 are, but that'll be a future thing that will link up planned usage with checklist actual usage to make it sort of flow nicely through there. So this doesn't have any impact on miles used at the moment. You can do this with any asset type at all, but clearly it's designed for locos. Just the same as with rosters and base timetables, you can specify base usage. So if I go to the base timetables, go to my red timetable, base asset usage. We've talked before about base timetable trains. I'm sure at some point in the future we'll talk about base rosters. Anything in timetables with this word base on the beginning means a template that can get used on that day. So let's imagine, and I'll do diesel this time, diesel 1, 100 miles. And I'm making this template that I'm sure you can guess what's coming in a minute. I'm going to be able to stamp onto the calendar days in asset usage. So there's my template. Sorry, I was a bit quick there because I'm conscious that it's 8:15. There's my template. But normally on a red timetable, this is normally the locos I require. I'm not fixed to it. It's just what I normally require. If I go to asset management, look at my locos asset type, planned usage, whoops, edit requirements, and I'll just do all this time every single day, import from base timetable, submit. and a diesel 1, a diesel 2 has now appeared on every red day because it was the red days in the base time table. I didn't do anything for yellow days or blue days. It was the red days that I specified a template for. So it's a much easier way, as you'd expect, of putting in all the unallocated slots for locos to go in. Oh, I better not allocate a diesel slot to a Thomas or Henry, but there you go, you get the picture. So just to recap briefly then, the asset management system, one of my favorite parts of HOPS, if I'm honest, one of the things that I think we do quite strongly, fixed info about assets, defect recording and risks arising from those defects and control measures arising from those risks, cyclical maintenance in terms of calendar days, days in use, or miles, and whoever it was that suggested hours. If you're an SLS customer and you want to get in contact, I'm sure we can cook something up. The work record for each asset and the planned usage. They're the 5 key things of the asset management system. Right, sorry, it's just come up on my screen. I had a one-off. Oh, if you have a one-off inspection that you want to plan in for 1 month in the future, non-recurring, can I schedule that in the system so that it doesn't tell me it's due today, i.e. the day it was assigned on HOPS? To be honest, if it's only one exam that you're only going to record once, then I'm suspecting that there's some reason why it only needs 1 exam. I would put it in as a defect, and the control measure is going to be we're going to do this exam within a month and put the control measure expiry date as 1 month from now. I'm imagining that a one-off inspection is probably either going to be due to some mechanical issue that's been discovered that other vehicles might suffer from, or some sort of regulatory requirement or change in the law or something. I would just model it as a defect if I was you, rather than putting it in the cyclical maintenance, because cyclical maintenance is, as the clue's in the name, cyclical. Yeah, that's the best I can suggest for that, I'm afraid. Right, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Please feel free to play around in the asset management system. If you're not an SLS customer, you won't be able to get into it. But if you're interested, I'm more than happy to do a free trial of a few weeks so that you can have a look and see what you could have won. We'll next be back on Friday the 29th of May for the next HOPS virtual workshop number 5, where we'll be looking at further user features, because I had lots of feedback from workshop number 1 that said, can you talk about this, can you talk about the other? And there's, as with everything in HOPS, there's loads of stuff, so I'm going to do a further user features on that one. Just a little quick note, if you didn't see, HOPS is in the process of developing a mobile signing on and off device. Mobile signing on and off device, similar to the time register system that we have already provided on tablets for signing on points, but this is particularly urgently being developed thanks to some organizations that requested it as a mitigation measure for enabling organizations to a degree of social separation, and signing on points is definitely congregates together. Mobile signing and good night.